Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to touch a bit on something called land adjudication. It's quite a term that we keep hearing left in terms of the government of the country trying to regularize land ownership. And its main objective is basically to prepare ownership documents and more so to sort out disputes in neighborhoods that land was never properly allocated to the actual owners who settles on those pieces of land. And today I'm going to delve on the process that has to take place in regard to land adjudication, and also look at the institutions that are involved in this process, and then basically be able to look at its importance. So I've prepared some notes here, and I'll be able to take you through this process because it's a critical legal process which is basically governed by the Land Adjudication Act, CAPS 284. And why do we carry out land adjudication? Maybe let me start there. Number one is basically to identify, then survey, prepare the records, and then determine the interests of the people who claim that they own that particular piece of land. And this basically happens in areas that were never formally registered to the people who reside on those pieces of land. And most of this happens to people who have moved into parcels of land that were government in nature, or they were former trust land. All these lands were community lands. And because of that nature of this piece of land, the actual ownership processing to the people who reside on those lands has never been done. So that's why the government of the day comes in to make sure that they regularize the process and ensure that now the inhabitants or the particular persons who have moved in these particular lands get the actual ownership. Of course, this ownership is not automatic. The verification must happen so that it is established that the people who are in those pieces of land are legally in those pieces of land. And we have seen this case in Mau Forest, where the government of the day has been trying to settle people who actually moved out of their ownership of their own piece of land. We've also seen it happening to the IDP in terms of them being settled into the pieces of land that they moved into once they were kicked out in their previous places of residence. So what is the objective of land adjudication? Number one is to establish who legally owns each parcel of land, because you may find that people moved into a big parcel of land, and maybe each of them give themselves a piece of an eighth of an acre, and 1 acre, 2 acres. So there comes a time when this need to be regularized to establish who legally owns this piece of land, whether to establish that these lands still belong to the government. Most of the cases we find these are lands that are owned by KFS, Kenya Forest Services. Number two is to determine and record boundaries. You find people move in a particular piece of land and they share the ballot, but the due process to the end of getting the title deed does not occur. So land adjudication comes in to determine and record boundaries so that they are officially recognized. Number three, this happens to help resolve competing claims and land disputes. You find that you're in a neighborhood, especially the lands that were scheme in nature, and maybe our parents moved into these neighborhoods, and because they had a common objective, they never went ahead to actually determine and demarcate where their piece of land reaches in terms of boundaries, in terms of which road they use, the easements and all that. Then the kids come in and they start having disputes and they claim, oh, my dad used to own this piece of land, or we had this road used to pass here. So land adjudication comes in to set out those kind of disputes, so that it brings out harmony by resolving competing claims and land disputes. Number 4, it actually prepare and adjudicate a register for first registration. As I said earlier, you find these are trust lands, community lands. So the existing title is still the colonial mother title. So the subsequent owners, who I will call the first owners, have never received their documentation. So this process comes in to prepare an adjudication and register for first registration of ownership. Then finally, its objective is to facilitate issuance of title, because that's the ultimate objective. Because anybody who owns a piece of land, their interest is to make sure they secure the ownership documents, and in this case is a title deed. So basically the adjudication process objective is to establish who legally own each parcel of land. Number 2 is to determine and record boundaries, okay, to make these boundaries official. Number 3, resolve competing claims and disputes. Okay, you find a piece of land, there are 2-3 people who claims ownership, so this process comes in to sort out that problem. Number 4 is to prepare an adjudication and register first registration. Basically, this means is establishing a new file of these particular parcel numbers and their title numbers. And then finally is to facilitate the issuance of title deeds. And this process is quite a lengthy process, and I will look at what takes place in a summary in terms of what are the processes that need to take place. Number 1, there comes a declaration of an adjudication section. So this has to be declared by the government through Kenya Gazette notice, and mostly it's through the cabinet secretary, that an adjudication process is happening on a particular piece of land. I think we saw it some time back in Muranga, under what we used to see to call it, I think, is Boy Kamete land and Kihiumwere, where the government of the day moved in to make sure that people who have always claimed ownership of this land, each person gets a piece of it. It may be an either of a plot and all that. Then number 2 is to demarcate. Okay, demarcation basically means establishing the boundaries, of course, for the mother block, and also now regularize the boundaries of the people who have come in and set out their particular portions. Number 3, survey and mapping. Of course, now the lands bring the government of the day brings in the land surveyors, the government surveyors, so that they're able to survey this piece of land and establish that the people who claim to own these plots matches the number of plots that are in a particular neighborhood. Then number 3 is to record the interests. Of course, each person is told to stand where they have built, to stand on the plot they claim is theirs, so that documentation and the recording is made, so that where you stand, a number is given and your name is picked. Okay, then after that, a register is prepared. Okay, it's basically publication of an adjudication register, so that your name appears under the plot number that you claim is yours, and this is put out there maybe for 21 days, so that any competing interest on that particular plot that you claim is yours, in case there is any, that dispute is sorted out, and they need to be established who is the actual owner of that particular piece of land. And that actually comes to the next level of objections. If there are any objections, people are given to write, do it in writing within a specific period of time. Then if there are no objection, then there's a finalization in terms of now your IDs are taken, your PIN certificates, and the proper paperwork is taken, so that at least documentation process starts. And then the first registration is prepared. Basically, this is the first scheme of that particular neighborhood. And as I discussed earlier, a first registry index map, the cadastral map, is prepared to enhance or to enable people to get their title deeds. And most of the institutions that are involved in this kind of a process, number one is of course the Ministry of Lands and Public Works, because that's where land matters resides. Then there's an appointed land adjudication officer who comes in to take people through this process in terms of recording the interests of particular parcels of land, collecting any objections that may come into place, then preparing a final documentation of the final role of the owners, and then now preparing the first register, or what we call the first registration. Of course, the Survey of Kenya will come on board so that they're able to prepare the maps, registry index map, and even open the proper files and establish proper boundaries. Okay. Of course, the county government comes in, land is devolved. Of course, the county registries will come in, so at least in case there are any subdivision approvals that need to be granted, the county would do that. Then, of course, there is a set land adjudication committee that comes also with an arbitration board, because in this kind of a process there will be disputes, so there need to be arbitrators, so that at least in case of a disputed piece of land, that resolution is sorted out and also registered in a court of law. And finally, then I look at the importance of land adjudication. Okay, so number one is to provide legal certainty of ownership, because you don't want to build a home on a piece of land that you've not certified that is your land, in terms of getting an ownership document and also getting a title deed. So that process is very important to ensure that the certainty of ownership to a particular person is established. Number two is to reduce land disputes, the boundary disputes, multiple ownership claims. So adjudication process comes in to sort out that issue. Number two is to enable the landowners to own the title deed, because without a title deed, and you've built or you live in a particular land, it will never become yours. So if you're in this kind of neighborhoods that you've not been able to get title deeds to your piece of land, it's high time you invoke this process through the lands office in your district level. Walk to the land officer there and you request for land adjudication. And even it may actually even happen to what I discussed earlier, where people bought land as a group, big group circles, and this land has never been subdivided. You've never gotten proper ownership documents, and because of a prolonged level of and we saw this in Embakasi ranching in Nairobi, where the government of the day moved in to adjudicate, so that at least these people who just had a shared certificate, they're able to get proper title deeds. So if you're in a circle, if you're in a group of, maybe your parents were in a chama of wazes and they own piece of land, and this land has never been properly processed, this is what you need to do. You need to invoke land adjudication process, of course through the Ministry of Land, through your district land office. Number three is to support investment, because if you don't have any title deed, you don't have documentation for a piece of land, you cannot develop, you cannot access credit. So by ensuring that you have a piece of land that belongs to you by virtue of you having a title, of course it supports investments and unlock development. And then finally is to enhance land administration and planning, because the government of the day can only provide services in a particular neighborhood if proper road networks have been surveyed, proper infrastructure is laid in place. Of course, it may come over time, but in terms of scheme plans, the maps, the RAMs are in place, so that if the road networks need to be done, they can be done. But without proper land adjudication, services cannot come into that place. So this is a very critical process, and I know most of us out there have this kind of scenarios. You're in some sort of ownership disputes, you're in some sort of ownership that is not complete. Maybe you own a share certificate and you don't know how you can get to the final processing of title deeds. Maybe there be disputes, there are competing interests. Through a surveyor, through a lawyer and a planner, you need to invoke land adjudication process through your land office, so at least this process takes place through a gazette notice, and you are able to procure your ownership documents, and that is the title deed. Thank you very much. Take a minute, like the page, do subscribe, so that you're able to prepare these materials and be able to educate more people out there. See you in the next one.